What you have just seen is part of an astounding collection of psychic phenomena, demonstrations of the powers of the mind. Everything that your eyes will witness in this film is real. Nothing has been staged. There are no actors, only real people who may have found powers that lurk within us all. You may find this reality more difficult to believe than fiction. That is why we ask you to open your eyes, open your minds, and enter into a world that is truly beyond belief. Psychokinesis, faith healing, is that folklore, myth, or reality? There was a time a man could be beheaded for saying that the earth was not the center of the universe, or ridiculed if he suggested that diseases were caused by tiny, unseen animals. Today, we accept those ideas unquestioningly, as we accept the fact that you can send color pictures and sound through the air, or that man can walk on the moon. Why can't we expand our beliefs to encompass other powers? Powers that exist even in the lowest forms of life. For instance, the simple microbes that have produced this yogurt, do they feel emotions? Do they feel love, hate, and hunger? Is it just human conceit that only man can feel emotions? Plants respond if you speak lovingly to them. Cleve Baxter, a seasoned professional in the use of electronic sensing devices, proved that. You know what he also proved? That yogurt gets hungry.
First, we have taken a small sample of the yogurt and put it in a glass vial, glass container. This container is included in a metal box that's shielding the yogurt from outside electromagnetic spectrum energies, electrical interference. The lead goes to the instrumentation, which in this particular case is not the conventional polygraph equipment, but we've switched over to electroencephalograph. Now, the electroencephalograph is instrumentation ordinarily used to monitor brain waves from humans. The thing that we found is that we can get a consistent and meaningful recording on the EEG from a yogurt sample, and the problem now, of course, was to build into the experiment a remote stimulus. Now, the remote stimulus that we've used in this particular case is to feed nutrient to a sample of the same yogurt located a considerable distance away in the same laboratory environment. These are the actual electrodes that are used during experimental runs, and they are made of silver wire mounted and attached to wires going into the shielded box and through a cable leading to the EEG. Now, the silver electrodes are immersed in the yogurt sample, and this is clamped into place. Now I'm going to take some of the nutrient and bring it into the syringe, which is milk, and I'm going to add the nutrient to the container of yogurt that I have in my hand. Now, actually, some yogurt from the same batch is being tested in the shielded cage, and the expectation is rather interesting. Now, after adding the nutrient, in fact, with about 10 or 15 seconds delay, we can get some additional reaction. The interesting part is, though, that the reward is being given not to the sample that's being tested, as you see here, but the sample that's being tested is reacting violently. We won't get into a philosophical discussion of whether this is a positive or a negative equivalent to emotion, but I think it's very, very interesting.
Somehow yogurt will just never seem the same again. Well, at least we've shown the possibility that lower forms of life can exhibit emotions. Now, what happens if the wee beasties get sick? Simple. You take them to a healer. And that brings us to Sister M. Justa Smith, a nun and highly respected biologist. Hardly a lady given to hysterical and unsupported claims. Sister Smith has done some very interesting work in microbes and faith healing. Yeah, faith healing. I know what you're probably thinking, but the facts are right here, and now right in front of your eyes.
I belong to a group of biochemists who believe that all illnesses are due to some malfunctioning enzyme. Now, if this be true, then any therapy, whether it be medicinal, physical, or paranormal, should affect the rate at which an enzyme reacts. In order to test this hypothesis, we want to determine whether or not a healer can affect a whole as well as a damaged enzyme.
Under strict laboratory procedure and control, 4 batches of enzyme are prepared. 1 set tested for activity and set aside. A second is weakened under ultraviolet light. Selections from the normal and weakened enzymes are placed in a powerful electromagnet and in the healing hands of Olga Worrell. Previous experiments have shown the hands of the average person have little or no effect on enzymic activity. However, in this series of experiments, both the magnet and Olga Worrell's hands produced matched activity in all samples.
There really is nothing supernatural, nor mysterious, nor occult about paranormal healing. It can be tested and measured and demonstrated in a scientific laboratory.
Now for the big time. We are going to move up to more complex organisms, humans. Maimonides Hospital in Brooklyn is a well-known research and medical facility. It is also the haunt of one Dr. Stanley Krippner. The good doctor works with ordinary people who have no previous record of psychic powers. Only he has discovered a power that lies in all of us.
When ESP occurs in everyday life, it usually occurs in what we call an altered state of consciousness, such as hypnosis, dreams, or relaxation states. For this reason, when we started our investigations into ESP, we did work with the telepathic dream. In other words, we had one of our subjects sleeping in a soundproof room trying to dream about a message that was being sent to him from a distant point. At that distant room, one of our psychologists spent most of the night looking at a picture, trying to project or transmit the image of that picture into the dreams of the sleeping subject. Back at the lab, we watched the electroencephalographic machine very closely to see what types of brain waves and what type of eye movements the subject was demonstrating. When he began to produce rapid eye movements, we knew that he was dreaming.
Michael, wake up. Can you tell me what's been going through your mind now?
Yeah. I was at a circus and was laughing at a clown in a big red suit. It was making me laugh. He was very jolly, and he was holding these 3 big red balloons. And it was a holiday, Christmas or the 4th of July. That's it. That's all I think.
Okay, thank you. You can go back to sleep now.
In the experiment that you just saw, the target picture was a scene in Honolulu of Santa Claus during a Christmas party on the beach. The dream report from the sleeping subject mentioned a circus and a clown in a big red suit, therefore showing some correspondence with the festive atmosphere of the Christmas beach party. Then when the subject went on to talk about red balloons and a fat and jolly man, he's capturing some of the color and some of the atmosphere which we associate with Santa Claus. Finally, the subject does specifically mention Christmas, therefore adding an additional correspondence to this particular picture.
One more? Okay. Here is Douglas Dean, author of the bestseller Executive ESP, and a well-known researcher into the untapped powers of the mind.
I'm attaching myself to the sensor of a plethysmograph instrument. The plethysmograph measures blood volume changes. The blood volume changes with the heartbeats and with emotional states in the body. And I'm using the instrument in telepathy experiments to see if the body registers receiving telepathic messages even when the conscious mind is not aware of it.
2 people, one a sender and one a receiver, each submit 5 names of people with strong emotional meaning onto cards. 5 more telephone book names which are neutral, and 5 blanks make up a 20-card deck which the sender looks at one at a time in random order and at random time.
Do you feel relaxed all right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, good. Well, just keep your mind clear, and the experiment will last about 20 minutes. I'll be back then to let you out.
Okay.
I'll just check that the plethysmograph...
The receiver lies relaxing on a bed with her finger attached to the plethysmograph and does not know what the sender is doing, nor when. While this is going on, I am monitoring changes in her finger volume on the plethysmograph.
Results showed that as her heartbeat went along smoothly while she relaxed, then when a name which had emotional significance for her was sent telepathically, we note a rapid drop in volume. She was not consciously aware of any change, but her finger registered it. Since there was no way using her senses that she could have known this, we assume it is due to ESP.
Now it's your turn. While that film was being shown, I chose one of these three geometric shapes, and I'm going to concentrate on the one I chose. Your job will be to pick the first one that comes into your mind. Now, don't think about it or try to use logic. You just relax and pick the first one that comes into your mind. Ready? Okay, here we go. The one I was concentrating on was the triangle. How many of you picked up my thoughts? The odds were 2-to-1 against the correct choice, normally. Most of you correctly picked the triangle because we cheated. We flashed the triangle on the screen subliminally. You couldn't see it with your conscious mind, but your unconscious saw it all. You can see it here in slow motion. Now, we did this more to prove a point than to fool you. Many believe this is how ESP works. Tiny bits of information are gathered below the conscious level until a pattern emerges. Then the conscious mind finally gets the message. At least that's how it works on one level. We all know the experience of feeling that we have been in a strange place once before. The French call that déjà vu. Why is that woman screaming? Because she's drowning in a flood in 1908. This is her form of déjà vu. She's in another life, a life that appeared under hypnosis in this very room. Believe me, no fakery is involved in this, as you will see.
Feel your eyes becoming heavier, heavier. Feel yourself wanting to close your eyes with your eyes.
This is David Friedman,
heavy.
a member in good standing of the American Institute of Clinical Hypnotists. The woman we will call Susan.
Easily.
Susan is a housewife of no noticeable psychic powers. She is normally a quiet, unassuming, almost shy lady. She has been hypnotized only once before. It was during this hypnosis that very strange things began to happen. The producers of this film heard of it and prevailed upon Mr. Friedman and Susan to repeat the experiment before our cameras. No one knew where this would lead. The results were remarkable.
Your calf muscles and knees relax. Feel your... We are approaching a tunnel. A tunnel. A tunnel that is dark and long. When I reach the count of 0, you will walk through the tunnel. I will count from 1 to 4. At the count of 4, you will be exposed to the light. The light. You will have a very vivid impression as a light is revealed to you. Feel yourself drifting easily, comfortably, backwards, backwards in time, backwards and easily. 1 and 0 as you easily walk through the tunnel, easily and quite comfortably. 1, 2, easily. 3, as you begin to see the light, and 4. Where are you?
I'm in Wyoming.
In Wyoming? What city in Wyoming?
I just see a sign. That's all I see. I don't know. It's a Longacre. A saloon.
What are you doing there in the saloon?
Well, I take money from men for favors. That's what I do.
Do you earn a lot of money?
Not very much.
Do you like what you're doing?
Not very much. But Hilda and George?
Who are Hilda and George?
Well, Hilda's place. That's where I am. It's Hilda's place. They're nice. I guess it's better than being out on a street somewhere. When you say that, at least it's a hindsight better than that. But sure wish I could do something else.
What is the year?
1860.
How did you get to Wyoming? Do you know?
No. I don't know how I got there. I don't know where anybody is. I just know it's old people there. A little busy place. In and out all day. Sloshing down that liquor. Whew.
Where do you live?
I live there.
Where? You have a room there?
Yeah, I have a room upstairs.
Do you have a favorite customer in the bar?
Well, Pete. Pete, well, I don't know who his last name, Pete. Gives me 2 bits. That's it, 2 bits.
2 bits for what?
Well, you know, I told you that. I take money. I don't like it at all. I don't like it at all. But if you're going to persist on it, you're going to persist on it?
Okay. What kind of man do you like?
Well, I like a very nice, gentle man who talks with me as me, not from here, from this kind of place. Do you understand me?
Yes.
Hilda's nice, though. She really is nice. And they're very good to me. I should be happy here. Oh, poor Angie.
Aren't you happy, Angie?
Well, I guess I could be a lot happier, but I guess I could be a lot unhappier. I said before that I could be laying out in the middle of nowhere. But here I am. I just guess I should be kind of lucky.
As the session wore on, Susan again entered the dark tunnel. When she emerged this second time, she exhibited mannerisms and speech patterns we had not seen before, neither in her present nor her past life.
Where are you?
In Kansas.
Kansas. Do you know what year it is?
1908.
Do you know the town in Kansas?
Houghton, Kansas.
How old are you?
12.
What is your name?
Julie.
Do you have a best friend?
Molly.
Molly.
Jameson.
Molly Jameson.
Molly lives with us. I don't know where her parents are, but Molly lives with us. She doesn't feel too well. She has trouble with her leg. So I'm with her a lot.
Does she go to school with you?
No. No, she doesn't go to school. But I help her.
I want you to come back to where we were before the flood. You will answer some questions concerning the flood. You will be able to answer them because you will have a clear picture in your mind. Julie, you're back at the flood scene now.
Oh, it's...
Where are you?
The water, it's just coming back.
What time of day is it?
Nighttime.
What time?
It's almost nighttime.
How did you get there?
We heard people. We heard so many people. Oh, it's terrible. It's just terrible. Everybody. Oh, Molly.
What's the matter with Molly?
Molly.
What's happening with Molly?
Molly's in the water. Oh, I'll have to get her. I can't. I don't see my... Molly. Oh, please. What's happening is... first I'm walking through it. It's not too bad. But I'm so scared. It's coming up. It's just coming up, Mama. Oh, Mama. Mama.
Julie. Julie, why can't you get out? At the count of 3, you will relax. 1, 2, you are relaxed, 3. Relaxed. Good.
Has Susan led previous lives? Only a long series of hypnotisms with her would provide the necessary details to check out her other lives. But we do know some things. There is a town in Kansas called Holton. There was a flood in that area in 1908. From India. It was a demonstration of the yoga art of muscle control. It is an example of the powers of the mind to control the functions of the body. Here's another look at those carefully controlled stomach muscles. That has for centuries brought forth remarkable men dedicated to unlocking the mysteries of the human mind. The art of deep meditation has long been considered an important part of the potential powers of the human brain. Dr. Elmer Green of the Menninger Clinic has spent a good portion of his life scientifically studying the phenomenal ability of the mind to consciously control what were thought to be automatic body functions.
One of the unusual people we had a chance to study was Swami Rama from Rishikesh, India. We had heard that he could do some unusual things, and we asked him to perform. He demonstrated blood flow control in his hand, and then one day he said, "Tomorrow I'll stop my heart." We objected to this because of the fact that he had said it was a risky thing to do without fasting, and he hadn't been fasting. But he said, no, I want to do it. I've never been wired up before. If I do it, now I'll know what I can do. When we still objected, he said, I'll sign papers that say the Menninger Foundation is not responsible for my death. Well, the way it worked out, he won the argument. We didn't bother about the papers because he agreed to only stop his heart for 10 seconds. When we wired him up and put him in the lab, we found out that his heart was beating at a normal rate, and suddenly it began beating at 5 times the normal rate. And when I asked him about this, and I said, you know, your heart didn't really stop the way we thought. I thought it was going to draw a straight line. He said, well, you know, when you stop your heart this way, it still flutters in there. Later on, we took this record to a cardiologist to find out what was really going on. And he said, well, this phenomena is called atrial flutter. And you know, the heart is just fluttering in there. He happened to use the same word that the Swami used. And then the cardiologist said, the blood pressure has dropped. He is probably fainted. And by the way, what happened to this man anyway? We said, well, nothing. We took off his wires and he went up and gave his lecture.
But all that control isn't limited to the yogas. Take Jack Schwartz, for instance.
How do you go about a pain control problem from the inside? What do you do?
Well, there's a process of being non-attached.
Are you saying you look at yourself in an objective way?
Oh, yeah, totally objective. Under no circumstances subjective, because it's the subjectivity what makes, and the indoctrination we have gone through, that's what is in our subconscious mind, what tells us that we should feel pain and we should bleed and we should get infection, which interfere with the process.
You know, you said an interesting thing. You said fear, and then you said unconscious.
Right.
And what it sounds like is what you're saying is that you have to get conscious control of the unconscious. Jack discovered his ability to consciously control normally unconscious involuntary processes when he was a boy in Holland. He has demonstrated all sorts of unpleasant things to doctors to show that the mind can control pain and bleeding. After Jack had been wired up, Judy assists Dale Walters in the control room in monitoring Jack's brainwaves, heart rate, and other physiological indicators, while Jack demonstrates pain and bleeding control. They use a closed-circuit TV to correlate Jack's movements with the polygraph records.
The calibrations are set and we're ready to go now.
Okay, well, we're ready to go. How about letting me see that needle, Jack? This is your weapon.
Right.
It looks like a regular steel needle. What is it exactly?
Well, it is a so-called sailmaker's needle. It is about 4.5 to 5 inches long. And as you see, it is not any special preparation on it. It's even rusty.
Yeah, it looks a little rusty.
And of course, you are putting nicely your germs on it now too. So before I'm going to pierce this through the arm, let us sterilize it first with my germs too, so we get a kind of nice intermixing of germs and bacteria. And we cannot do it with, normally we do this on the floor with my foot to show that the body will not take any infection, that it will throw the different foreign bodies which wouldn't go into the body are thrown out. So anytime that you feel that I should put this needle through now, of course I'm going to pierce the needle really through from this point through this point, and I'm not going to look if there are any specific arteries involved or veins or capillaries involved. So I will just keep talking to you, and if you can support my arm a little bit, then we can put it right in there.
Oh,
right.
All right, okay.
So,
okay.
So now it is through, and we can leave it in there for a couple of seconds. Well,
It looks like it's buried about half an inch deep in your bicep.
Yes, it is really. And as you see, an interesting thing again occurred. It comes right out of a vein here, which is kind of pronounced vein.
Out of a small
and
vein.
Here, again, by accident, I put it in a vein here too. It is as if it's.
I noticed something interesting as you're doing that. I could feel all sorts of tissue things happening inside as you were pushing it.
Yeah. Well, here again, it is not as if I'm putting a needle through my arm, but I'm putting a needle through a arm, which just happened to be part of a body which I temporarily possess in order to function through. And then again, the mind, in a non-attached, subjective way, is looking from a distance at it and monitoring the whole process.
Well, when you pull this needle out, do you want me to hold it again, or do you?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
Now it is out, and now what you could do, if you would grab the arm and kind of wring so that you don't cover the holes, so that the holes are still visible, wring it like a dish rag, and put pressure upon it with tremendous power. You can use all your physical power
I
for
could
that.
try to force some blood out of it.
Right.
I
Now,
noticed
of
that
course,
by forcing it up, I could force one little drop of blood.
One little blood drop, which we now, of course, just wipe off, and it stops. It stops immediately, and the hole will start closing. As you see, this hole already is closed.
This one is closed. The bigger one here.
The bigger one is because we had to really wriggle our way in there to make the first contact. But if you can observe it, it is now getting smaller already, and it is closing.
When we get the records, our physiological records, I'd like to show you what they are, and we can talk about what they might mean. It seems to me from the brainwave record and heart rate record that you didn't show any significant reaction to pain. The question which comes up, however, is a question which I'm asked lots of times when I'm giving lectures. What good is it going to do me to learn how to stop my heart or poke needles through my arm?
Well, it's very logical that this question should come up. And I personally am not out to demonstrate putting needles through my arms to teach people that specific thing. But what can be taught to people is that they can self-regulate their mind-body coordination so that their physiological processes will be in such a state that they can prevent any disease.
And then there was Yogi Raj. In an experiment conducted in cooperation with Professor Ramakrishna Rao of Andhra University, Yogi Raj, after preliminary tests, was sealed in an airtight box for 7.5 hours. Normal breathing and normal metabolism could be expected to quickly use up the limited oxygen supply, and he would pass out. We felt, therefore, that he would at least have to control his emotional state in order to lower the metabolic rate of his body. We were particularly interested in his brainwave record as a clue to his meditative condition during the experiment. When we got back to the United States, Judy ran his records through the polygraph.
What we're interested in is the state of consciousness that enables this yogi to stay in the box in a reduced oxygen environment for 7 hours. We're looking at the brainwave rhythm of the yogi in the box. He's now been in the box for 7 hours. This is very clear alpha. It's a fairly high amplitude and it's a slow frequency. He has produced this alpha wave nearly continuously for the 7 hours that he's been in the box in a situation which most of us would probably be panic-stricken. Now this indicates that he's in a very quiet, relaxed, mental and emotional state, and he's also in a quiet physiological state.
Jack Schwartz and Yogi Raj, two extraordinary men. Men who have spent years developing the unusual muscles of their minds to perform deeds far beyond the grasp of you and me. But what of you and me? Don't we possess powers that could be called upon without a lifetime's preparation? Dr. George Owen, Canada's foremost expert on parapsychology, thinks so. He's taught groups of ordinary people, just like you and me, to focus the powers of their minds in a matter of weeks. In his carefully supervised experiments, all the carnival trappings of seances and the like have been stripped away. Under scientific conditions, Dr. Owen's group proved the powers that may lie within us all.
The members of the group are regarded as perfectly normal people, or as normal as anyone can actually be. 4 are housewives: Sue, Dorothy, Andy, and Iris. Sid is a salesman, Bernice an accountant, Al is an engineer, and Lorne a designer. None of them claims to be a medium. Psychical research is just one of their many diverse interests. As researchers, the group had to be scrupulous in their approach. The first problem they had to solve was this: how to be sure that if they got physical effects, these were not due to a spirit. So they decided to make up a completely fictional character, an imaginary person with the given name of Philip and a completely imaginary biography. A week later, she narrated the story of Philip.
This is it. Philip was an aristocratic Englishman living in the middle 1600s at the time of Oliver Cromwell. He was married to a beautiful but cold and frigid wife, Dorothea. One day when out riding, Philip came across a gypsy encampment and saw there a beautiful gypsy girl, Margot, and fell instantly in love with her. He brought her back secretly to live in the gatehouse near the stables of Dittingen Manor, his family home. For some time he kept his love nest a secret, but eventually Dorothea, realizing he was keeping someone else there, found Margot and accused her of witchcraft and stealing her husband. Philip was too scared of losing his reputation and his possessions to protest at the trial of Margot, and she was convicted of witchcraft and burned at the stake. Philip subsequently was stricken with remorse. Finally, one morning his body was found at the bottom of the battlements whence he had cast himself in a fit of agony and remorse.
Oh, that's enough. You really used your imagination on that one.
The group discussed the life and character they had given Philip until they were all agreed on the details. A picture was drawn by Andy and agreed to be a true likeness of Philip. It should be stressed that though Diddington Manor is a real place, there is no evidence that anyone like Philip ever lived there. In addition, some historical errors were deliberately introduced into the story to emphasize its fictitious nature.
Oh, yes, definitely. I think you got it exactly. Especially the eyes.
In the fall of 1973, the group changed their approach as a result of reading articles by Mr. Batcheldor and Mr. Brooks Smith and Mr. Hunt, which appeared in the Journal of the British Society for Psychical Research. These investigators had got physical effects by sitting round a table, as in the old spiritualist seances. But they created an atmosphere of jollity and relaxation. They told jokes, sang songs, and exhorted the table in a light-hearted way to obey their commands. The Toronto group adopted the same approach, singing such ditties as Lloyd George Knew My Father to the tune of Onward Christian Soldiers, playing music such as Greensleeves or Amazing Grace, and addressing questions to the table as if it really were Philip. And between sittings, objects suggestive of Philip, such as fencing foils, 17th century manuscripts, and pictures of Diddington Hall were kept. For most sittings, the same four-legged table was used. As soon as the group adopted this new approach, they got phenomena. First there came a vibration in the table. Also, raps came out of the table. They seemed to come from inside the woodwork.
Hello, Philip. Are you there?
Good morning, Philip.
Good morning, Philip. Hi, Philip. I heard you bought some more new horses.
Come on. Speak up. Let's hear some knocks.
Come on, let's get some bangs. Come on, let's get going. Have you brought Dorothea with you? Have you seen Dorothea lately? No. No. Would you like to see Dorothea lately? No. No. Didn't you love Dorothea in your time? No. That was too...
Oh, that's louder, Philip.
Yes, we need them louder. Philip, come on, louder.
Good and loud.
Philip, did you like Dorothea?
Oh.
That's good. chronic. Did you love Margot?
Margot. Oh, yeah.
Yes. Say it again. Did you love Margot? Good. Come on.
Then the table would actually move. It would glide over the thick pile carpet, or even rear up on one or two legs only. Attempts to reproduce this motion by pushing always fail. It was impossible to imitate the table's spontaneous motion.
The group has succeeded many times. Visitors have watched their proceedings in bright light or even joined the group at the table. It's clear that there is no possibility that the phenomena are produced by trickery. The Society's research committee, under Dr. Owen, has taken every precaution to obviate fraud and can state categorically that the phenomena are genuine and paranormal.
That Philip, the imaginary communicator, will answer questions put to him by sitters or visitor. 1 rap for yes, 2 raps for no. Philip, of course, has no independent existence. He says just what a majority of the sitters happen to think he ought to say. It is a case of psychokinesis by committee. If a question has an obvious answer, the response, whether in the form of 1 rap or 2, comes promptly and with emphasis. If, however, the members of the committee take time to individually reason out what the question means, or are doubtful as to the right answer, then the response is feebler and delayed.
Let me tell you, our resident cynics went over every frame of that film. There are no wires. There is no camera magic. That really happened. Now, Philip was an imaginary ghost, but ghosts just may be real. When a person dies, there is a weight loss of a few ounces that medical science cannot explain. Something that has weight leaves the body. It can be measured, but it cannot be found. What is it? Is it the soul? If it is the soul, where does it go? A Chicago doctor did a survey of several hundred patients who had died and been brought back through medical miracle. Many of them were angry at the medical team. Although they were separate instances, all of the experiences had a similarity. They had found death an indescribably wonderful sensation. These patients had experienced a separation from the body of a spirit-like self-entity, and that spirit hung around, gazing down at the body, trying to tell the medical team not to bother, that death wasn't so bad. But no one would listen. But there do seem to be some who listen, perhaps too well. And one of the most amazing is our next subject. He's a young English lad named Matthew Manning. And his story is so amazing, so startling, that we decided to let it unfold to its incredible conclusion. A conclusion that is shattering in its totally unassailable logic and proof.
My wife, Valerie, and I were living in a modern house 5 miles from Cambridge. Andrew, our youngest child, was 6 at the time, Rosalind was 7½, and Matthew was 10½. The pattern of life in our household was, I suppose, rather ordinary, and the day would begin when I went downstairs to open up the fire that had been burning overnight and to draw back the curtains. One February morning in 1966, I had completed this domestic chore, and having drawn back the curtains, I noticed on the floor a silver tankard lying on its side, and this tankard was normally kept on a shelf. I put the tankard back onto the shelf, and at breakfast time asked the family if they had any explanation as to why the tankard was on the floor, and no one had. And in addition, of course, there were no signs of forcible entry into the house. The following day I repeated my routine and found the tankard for a second time on the floor. The third morning the tankard was again moved, and in addition I noticed on the dining table there was a pottery dog normally kept at the other end of the room in the centre of the table. And there was also a large vase of flowers with its water unspilled on the table in front of the place where my wife normally sat. I think at that moment I instinctively felt the explanation was poltergeist. From that time on, the disturbances in the room became more serious, but the events always took place between 7 and 7:20 each morning. Tables, chairs, ashtrays, cushions, ornaments would be moved and upturned, but nothing was ever damaged. 5 years elapsed, and my family began to see the earlier events in some perspective. Matthew, then 15, was now at public school, and we had moved from our modern house to an older house, this house, which had been built in the 17th and 18th centuries. It was Easter 1971, and Matthew was home from school, when suddenly all the occurrences opened up again, but this time with renewed vigor.
Well, I think the thing that sticks out in my mind most was the fact that we would go into one room and find that everything was upside down. It was as if the room had imploded and everything was thrown towards the center. You'd find tables on top of one another and chairs overturned and everything taken off the walls. Just as I've arranged this room to give you some idea of what it was like. Sometimes every room in the house was like this. As soon as we tidied up the first room, we would find the second room exactly the same. And then by the time we'd cleared the second room, the first room would be again disarranged. Beds would be stripped or turned upside down or upended. On one occasion, I even remember my sister's bed was stripped and then put half out of a first floor window, so that there was all the bedclothes and half the bed hanging out of the window.
I remember one occasion we had a broom on the landing, and we went upstairs and found it was balanced across the banister at the top, just sort of like this, in midair, and it was exactly perfectly balanced. And we took it away and tried to rebalance it, and it was extremely difficult to do.
I remember when I was in the kitchen with my younger brother, and the trolley came towards us at quite a speed. It didn't make any noise, so we presumed that the wheels must have been above the ground. We were so scared we just ran away.
I could see no early conclusion to these events, and I was becoming increasingly concerned for Matthew's position when he returned to school. I could see that possibly he would be an outcast or victimized, or that he would be accused of stealing possibly, or that some other boy, quite innocently, would be compromised. And I was most anxious that this shouldn't occur. I remember very clearly the hastily convened meeting that I had that Sunday evening with the headmaster.
As a housemaster and a headmaster, one does meet with a variety of situations in education, but I must say that the strangest, I think, that I've ever encountered was this meeting with Mr. Manning back in the summer of 1971.
My immediate reaction, rather, as an old square, was to discount a good deal of what he'd told me, and I did feel that, well, in the hurly-burly of a boarding house, of a school, the rough and tumble generally, somehow these manifestations, these disturbances, might very well not occur at all. Anyway, I was certainly perfectly prepared to try this out. Well, in point of fact, from a very early stage that term, after a day or two, disturbances did undoubtedly occur.
Well, this is the dormitory that I slept in with 25 other boys, and in actual fact, this is the very bed that I slept in. And frequently, this bed would move. You could see it's a very heavy bed, and it would move over to the beds over there.
There were lights that appeared on the wall, and the wall, if touched, was warm. There were sudden showers of extraordinary items, bits of broken glass, bits of chain, bits of cutlery, which would descend sometimes in the dormitory, sometimes in the changing room, with a cloud of witnesses. In his study, the radio or the record player would get mysteriously switched on or off by no apparent human agency. Books would move and so on. And I think we were all satisfied that something quite inexplicable, rationally, was happening.
I was in the same dormitory as Matthew, and we had some very unusual experiences happening. I remember one boy in particular was very frightened of all these things that were going on in the dormitory, and he took a Bible up to bed with him, hoping that this would protect him from what was going on, keep all the knives that were being thrown at everybody at bay. It didn't seem to do much for him. It just seemed to aggravate the situation. He seemed to get more of these knives and forks and so on thrown in his direction than anybody else did. These knives and forks used to come flying at us from all directions. They never used to hit us, so although they frightened us at first, afterwards we began to just take it for granted that they would miss us by inches.
The domestic staff, which were engaged to come and clean the boys' dormitories daily, always used to start their work after the boys left their dormitory at 8 o'clock, and thereon they were not allowed to go back in there again. And the staff came to me, not once but several times, to say, "Matron, is at it again?" And I'd go back to their dormitory and find a chair across the door one couldn't enter, beds had been twisted and mattresses upturned, and such phenomena.
I stumbled across a way of stopping the poltergeist purely by accident. About the time when this poltergeist activity was going on, I was writing an essay. I don't know, I can't even remember what it was about. And I had my hand just poised slightly above the paper, and I was thinking of what to write next, because I couldn't think of anything. And I must have gone off into a daydream and my hand suddenly went down, and I started scrawling across the paper in an illegible and incoherent writing which didn't make any sense. And that surprised me, and I didn't know what had happened. And so I ripped up the piece of paper, I think probably because I was frightened more than anything else. And then I noticed that for about 3 days after that had happened, we had no poltergeist activity at all. And it seemed that I had to empty my mind as completely as I could. And then, when my mind was almost completely empty, my hand would start moving, and it would write in a handwriting that wasn't my own. And I kept doing this automatic writing, and this was eventually what stopped the poltergeist activity. Well, after about 2 or 3 years, the writing became easier and easier to do until eventually I could more or less just sit down and do the writing at will, although I couldn't always get who I wanted to write for me. And then the writings or the messages began to come in different languages, foreign languages, and as I can only speak French, I think this surprised rather a lot of people, especially when I received messages in Arabic and Russian.
I had all the foreign scripts translated. The Arabic script I sent to the American University of Beirut, where Professor Suhail Bushrui translated and analyzed them. He was so interested that he came to London and presented us with some very startling facts. Apparently, these scripts were written by 5 different people from entirely different cultural backgrounds. Also, all the scripts referred to a person called George Lang, who apparently had been murdered in Saudi Arabia. I made subsequently inquiries about this person, George Lang, at the Saudi Arabian embassy and other authorities, but as soon as I mentioned the name, nobody wanted to know, and I couldn't get very much further. The most intriguing case is there are 15 letters or messages signed by Kephalos Nektarios. He was a bishop in the Greek Orthodox Church who died in 1920 and was made a saint in the Greek Orthodox Church in 1961. These messages are all addressed to Archbishop Athenagoras, the present metropolitan of the Greek Orthodox Church in Great Britain. It would be far too complicated to go into the details and contents of these letters, but His Eminence, the Archbishop, studied them very carefully and subsequently issued a statement which was then published all over Europe. And this is partly what he said in the statement. The case of Matthew Manning is beyond any form of logical investigation. I can positively say that the young man has been in no position to know of certain things which were contained in those messages. And when asked by a journalist why he thought that Bishop Nektarios was sending messages through an outsider, His Eminence answered, "I have always accepted that God has many ways in sending messages to his people, even to his archbishops."
And the other person that interested me was somebody called Robert Webb, and I had a lot of writing from this man. And we then went to the Public Records Office in Cambridge and found that this man had actually lived in this house between about 1680 to when he died in 1733. I then had to do a project for school. It was a history project, and I decided to do a project on 18th century social life, and I decided that I was going to concentrate on Robert Webb. And I hadn't got much information about him. I'd been to the Public Records Office and they couldn't help me much because most of the documents had been lost through floodwater. And it was about this time, when I needed a lot more information to make up the project, that Robert Webb said in some automatic writing that he would supply all the names that were missing that I needed. And he said that there were about 500. From that moment on, in this room, which at that time was my bedroom, my bed was along here, these names began to appear, and we came in one morning and we found this Robert Webb scrawled across the wall. We shut the room up again, and we came back about 10 minutes later and there was another one scrawled on the wall, and which is also Robert Webb. These signatures continued to appear at the rate of 70 or 80 each day until we got about 500 all over the door and the walls and even on the ceiling. It was interesting to note that every signature was dated. Nobody actually ever saw the signatures appear, but one only had to leave the room empty for 5 minutes or so, and then we'd come back and find more signatures. I started to number the signatures, and I also put big letters up on the wall so that it would make documentation easier. We were all amused when a new signature appeared, utilizing the letter T that I'd put up on the wall to write the name Thomas Buck. One night, we found in this old-fashioned handwriting on the door, signed by Robert Webb, "Zeno, hearing a young man speak too freely, says for this reason we have 2 ears and 1 tongue, because we should hear much and speak little." The next morning we all came down to breakfast and observed at the place usually occupied by myself a flyleaf from a book. Upon this flyleaf was repeated with the same misspellings and in the same handwriting the quotation that earlier had appeared on my door. Upon the reverse side in a different hand was inscribed, "Thomas Coas, write this on the last day of July 31st, 1791. The date when the message appeared on the door was 31st of July, 1971. Over the last few years, I've had literally hundreds of messages in automatic writing from Robert Webb, and the last one of which I received this afternoon actually while we were filming. I wrote down, "What do you think of all these lights that are in your house?" He replied, "Such pretty light as I never see in mine house." "And such a pretty light on mine stairs." "Oh, for some pretty light in mine bedchamber." "Oh, and such many persons in mine house." So I then reminded him that it was not his house, but our house. "Never have I heard the like of such nonsense," he said. Off with you. And then he signed his name very angrily, Robert Webb, in big scrawly writing. Well, as well as the automatic writing that I do, I also get a lot of automatic drawing. Many of these are signed by well-known artists, like Dürer, Picasso, Rowlandson, Klee. I don't always get drawings, of course, from people whose work I like. I get a lot of drawings from Picasso, and I don't like his work, and I don't like him doing drawings through me. I find him a very aggressive artist, and I rather feel he likes to dominate me. And somebody like Dürer, who is another artist who I've had a lot of drawings from, is completely the opposite. Dürer is much more delicate and gentle than Picasso, who has on occasions even smashed my pens. Beardsley is an interesting artist. When he draws, he always makes a mistake and then will proceed to black it over or turn it into something else. Of course, not all the drawings are signed by well-known artists. A lot of them are unsigned, and there are also many with signatures of artists whom we have not yet managed to trace, including with the drawings of birds, which I've most liked doing. These drawings always start from the center and then work out towards the edges. I always find it interesting to do these drawings because I never know until the picture is finished what I'm going to draw. It's a bit like having a magic painting book where you just put on the water and the picture appears. Only here, I just start drawing and I don't know what I'm going to draw. And then the drawing just appears. They're also drawn at a speed which is far faster, I'm sure, than most normal artists can draw. The drawing I did for this film took only about 7 minutes.
Incredible? Well, there are aspects of Matthew's psychic ability we have not covered. For example, his ability to bend a metal object with a touch. But we now have a scientific update on Matthew from studies on him made by a group of leading scientists.
We've done 2 experiments with Matthew, looking at his brain waves while he is bending keys or bending forks. Now, what we did was we hooked up an EEG machine. This is essentially an amplifier for looking at brain waves. And we used the special electrode arrangement that we've developed. The particular way that the experiment was done, we had Matthew just sitting in a chair, with his eyes open, relaxing, and then with his eyes closed, relaxing. Then I would give him a key and ask him to do whatever he does. Whatever goes on inside his head, when he bends the key, that's what I would ask him to do. Now, at the moment that he would bend the key, just the 10 seconds, just preceding that moment, we had some very interesting findings in his brain waves. It's something that had never been seen before in a natural experiment like this, in that the pattern of the brain waves was like a ramp function. At the low frequencies on his brain waves were in high amplitude, and the higher frequencies were very much attenuated. And that's a curious finding. It's curious because that particular ramp function is produced by only one group of cells in the brain. And that group of cells is called the nucleus accumbens. Perhaps for the first time, we may have a glimpse as to where in the brain this particular psychic ability is being controlled. And that's a breakthrough.
As a general rule, I think it could be dangerous trying to control things. People who have natural psychic abilities and feel confident about using them, it's all right for them to do things, but I'm a little dubious about whether people who can't control these things should try and do so.
The 2 questions that I'm asked most frequently are A, do you consider yourself a spiritualist? And B, what are you going to do with yourself in the future? Well, the answer to the first question is that I don't consider myself a spiritualist. I would say that I'm a spiritist. A spiritist is somebody who believes that one can communicate with the dead. A spiritualist is somebody who turns that belief into a quasi-religion. I don't intend becoming a full-time metal bender or spoon bender. I can't think of anything more banal than bending spoons for the rest of my life. I don't intend becoming a full-time medium either. That doesn't agree with my views, because I don't think one should make money out of gifts such as I have.
yogis and yogurt, enzymes and ESP, psychics and psychokinesis, the many powers that exist in all of us, just now being explored and tested, explained. What answers will soon be ours? What new powers will we someday prove and own? The dark recesses of the mind are slowly finding a new dawn.
Psychokinesis, reincarnation, psychic healing. All these extraordinary phenomena have puzzled mankind for thousands of years. Some now say that the secret to all these things will be revealed to us by extraterrestrials. Thousands of people from all different parts of our Earth claim to have seen unidentified flying objects. Some even claim to have been contacted by the creatures inside these UFOs.
Thursday night, I believe it was October the 11th, myself and a friend of mine were fishing on the Pascagoula River by the old Shaw Peter shipyard on the west side of the river. And I don't know, it just seemed to be all of a sudden that one of us looked around and heard something like a zip noise. And it just appeared that it was some type of spacecraft, and we saw a blue flashing light. And almost immediately, they seemed like the end of the craft opened up some way, and three things came out of it. I don't know. I mean, I still can't say whether it was beings or robots or what it was, but and they approached us almost immediately, and two of them took hold of my arms, and I seemed to just raise up to the level that they were, which they were about a foot or a foot and a half off of the ground, and they carried me inside of the spacecraft.
This is Charles Hickson, a Mississippi shipyard worker who claims to have encountered an unidentified flying object, a UFO, in 1973. Two eminent scientists later placed him under hypnosis and concluded that he was telling the truth. Shortly after World War II, on June 24th, 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing a cylindrically shaped flying object in the sky which looked like a flying saucer. Since then, thousands of similar sightings have been made around the world, and the mysterious spacecraft have become known as UFOs.
It was exactly 8:05 p.m. when Air Defense Command received word that a mysterious light was hovering low on the horizon, just northeast of Rapid City, South Dakota. Radar operators at Ellsworth Air Force Base shifted their attention to the northeast quadrant of the sky and immediately picked up an unidentified target. Air traffic control quickly contacted an F-84 patrolling in the west, asked for an interception, and vectored the jet toward the UFO. A moment later, the jet's radar picked up the unidentified return and locked on. The plane was just 3 miles from its target when the light suddenly moved away with a fantastic burst of speed. The pursuit lasted for 120 miles, but the jet could not gain on the object. Finally, the pilot abandoned the chase. At ground control, the fascinated radar men watched the unknown object change direction and trailed the jet back to the airfield.
Although science has failed to supply a generally accepted explanation of these phenomena, the subject has been investigated by the United States government, including a committee of the United States Congress. Congressman J. Edward Rausch of Indiana is chairman of the House Committee on Science and Astronautics. Congressman, do you believe the UFOs are fact or fiction?
Well, I hesitate in answering the question only because of this. I don't know. And that's my problem. I don't know whether they are fact or fiction.
Have you seen any films or photos of UFOs?
I have not seen film. I have seen photos which purport to be UFOs. A few years ago, I conducted a symposium here on Capitol Hill. And the participants of this symposium were scientists of some renown. They were scientists who had an interest in UFOs. And during the course of that symposium, photos were presented. No motion picture film, but photos were presented which purported to be UFOs.
Do you know Dr. Robert Baker?
Well, I know a Dr. Robert M.L. Baker, Jr., who testified before the House Committee on Science and Astronautics in 1968 and presented some fascinating testimony on UFOs.
The next two films are from the files of the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C., and Dr. Baker has analyzed and evaluated them.
Next, we have the Montana 1950 film showing two bright objects. It was taken about 11:30 a.m. Mountain Standard Time in August 1950 by Nicholas Mariana at Great Falls, Montana. Now, the natural phenomena here that is often given as the source of these images is airplane reflections. Airplanes, unless they were moving at fantastic speeds, would have to be so close to the observer to be identified as airplanes in order for them to portray the kind of motion seen on the film. So this I really don't concede to be airplanes, airplane reflections, comets, and some of the other things.
In 1952, several UFOs were sighted and photographed by Delbert Newhouse, a Navy photographer near Tremont in Utah. He estimated that there were about a dozen or so of the objects. They were the color of gunmetal and were shaped like two saucers, one inverted on the top of another. The explanation, that the camera was out of focus or that the objects were a flock of soaring gulls, has not been confirmed or denied by experts who have evaluated the film. Dr. Baker had this to say.
And birds simply don't make those kinds of accelerated turns at the high speed that they would have to be moving. There also exists meteorological data that would indicate that this probably wasn't the time where you have birds that can maintain flight for long periods of time simply spiraling.
They gave me, I guess, some type of examination. I don't know what it was, but it seemed to be maybe some kind of an eye or something that it kept floating back and forth over my body, which it didn't ever touch my body. And then I seemed to be floating on the inside. I didn't touch anything in there that I know of. And then later on, they carried me back outside and released me. And it seems like it was almost immediately again. I heard the little noise, the zipping noise, and the blue light was still flashing, and the craft was just almost immediately gone.
How do scientists explain these phenomena? Are they distorted visions of high-flying birds, insects, airplane reflections, wandering weather balloons, mirages, optical illusions, hallucinations, meteorites, the planet Venus? Or are they really little green men from another vastly superior solar system? This is Stanton T. Friedman, nuclear physicist and lecturer, the only American scientist devoting full time to the study of UFOs. Mr. Friedman, you have been studying UFOs for 15 years. What are your conclusions?
The evidence is overwhelming. The planet Earth is being visited by intelligently controlled extraterrestrial vehicles. In other words, some UFOs are somebody else's spacecraft. There are no good arguments against UFO reality if we consult the evidence.
What evidence is there?
There are all sorts of large-scale scientific studies, 5 prominent ones, I believe, which provide us with eyewitness testimony, with radar cases, with photographs, with simultaneous radar visual cases, with reports with visual aids, such as binoculars, telescopes, that sort of thing. I like to consult the large-scale studies rather than individual cases, because why bother with individual cases if you have collections of 2,000 cases, as we do? In the biggest study ever done on UFOs, done for the Air Force, and this is the cover of a privately published version because the original was never distributed to the public, Project Blue Book Special Report number 14, they covered 2,199 cases. And the public was told that only 3% were unknown, and that even those could have been identified if more data had been available. They were also told that soon we would be building round craft that look like this one up here, and that don't worry if you see one, it's ours. The question that really bothers many people is, who cares about the saucers, but are there any creatures on board? Are there any people from elsewhere associated with UFOs? Of course, the answer is that UFOs have been seen on the ground, many instances, have also been accompanied on occasion by characters, creatures, whatever you want to call them.
Did you struggle with them when they came out of the spacecraft?
No, I seemed to be unable to struggle. Whenever they took hold of me, I seemed to have lost all feelings, and I don't remember struggling any at all with them.
A man in Missouri gave a paper on 546 landing cases from 34 countries. These all involve traces, that is, where some marks were left after the UFO took off. One place where this happened was on the Johnson Farm in Delphos, Kansas, November 2nd, 1971. The strange marks in the middle there are a ring of soil affected by a UFO. There are a whole host of tests run on the ring. It's clear that something strange happened to the soil as far down as 14 inches deep. To give you an example of what happens to soil, the soil on the left was from that ring, obviously different in color and texture, and I might say from laboratory tests also different in composition from the normal soil on the right. One of the most famous cases is the one involving this couple, Betty and Barney Hill, who in 1961 not only saw a UFO, but according to hypnotic sessions done 2 years later, under regressive hypnotic analysis, they both told the same story of being taken on board that UFO, physically examined, put back out, told they wouldn't remember what happened, and not remembering what happened. What did they look like, which one can see here? This is a drawing made by an artist as Barney, under hypnosis, described what their captors looked like. They're under 5 feet tall, slightly different facial features than ours, but definitely humanoid. The communication system for these characters amongst themselves was kind of a murmuring sound, which didn't make any sense at all to Betty or Barney.
Did they communicate to you anyway, or to each other?
No, they didn't try or communicate with me. I did hear, well, one of them made some kind of a buzzing like noise, but the other two, I didn't hear any noise from them whatsoever.
Another version of what they look like, this is a drawing made by an artist, a composite based on hundreds of eyewitness reports. And obviously most landings don't get reported. This character's about 4.5 feet tall or so, 2 arms, 2 legs, a head and a body, slightly different facial features, obviously not like any of our friends down here on Earth.
What did they look like?
Well, they were about 5 foot tall, I guess, and they had some features of a human being, but they had more or less like pinchers or claws for hands, and I didn't see any toes on their feet. They seemed to be just, their feet seemed almost round, and the body, if it was a body, it didn't have any clothes on. It seemed to be, whatever it was, it seemed to be skin tight and wrinkly looking.
Here's a sequence still under evaluation from Salt Lake City, Utah, taken as indicated there, March 1972. Man was driving along, spotted just barely visible, a little object up there, got out, snapped pictures as it moved across from left to right. You can see how the features in the background change.
Mr. Friedman, is there any justification for us to be so concerned about them?
There are 2 justifications, really. The first is pragmatic. Think of what it would mean to us on planet Earth if we had systems able to duplicate UFO behavior, up, over, and down, high speed, no noise, no pollution, no burning of vital resources.
With all these visits, why haven't they made contact?
If you mean why haven't they landed and said, take me to your leader, as all the cartoonists talk about, the answer is obvious. Planet Earth has no leader to be taken to. If you mean, does their behavior make any sense? I think it does. Actually, all we have to do is look at our own Apollo program, and we see a parallel. We have lunar excursion modules. That is, strange-looking flying craft carried on board a mother craft, if you will, the launch vehicle. Then they hover out in the boondocks on the moon. You wait a while, they land, nobody around to help. You wait a little longer, and a couple of humanoid-looking creatures get out, wander around, pick up rocks, play games, get back into their craft, take off by themselves, disturb the soil behind them, rendezvous with the mothership, and head off toward another planetary body. The same sequence has been observed down here by Earthlings.
One of the pioneer astronauts was Brigadier General James McDivitt. In 1965, he spent 4 days in outer space as command pilot of the Gemini 4 spacecraft.
General McDivitt, do you believe that UFOs exist?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do. I know that UFO, which stands for Unidentified Flying Object, is a real thing because all you have to do is see an unidentified flying object or any unidentified thing that's flying, and you've seen a UFO. I think there are a lot of other people around, though, that feel that some of these UFOs, as we call them, are really spacecraft from other planets. I don't really know.
Have you ever personally observed a UFO?
Yes. During my flight on Gemini 4 in 1965, I saw an object in space fairly close to our spacecraft that I could not identify. It looked to me like maybe the upper stage of another rocket. I tried to take some pictures of it, but unfortunately the pictures did not come out properly. We never were able to identify what it was, and all of our ground radar tracking data indicated that there shouldn't have been another object anywhere near us at the time.
Colonel McDivitt, do you know of anyone else who claims to have seen a UFO?
Well, yes. As a matter of fact, I know all kinds of people who claim to have seen them. Some of them are very legitimate, and some of them I think are just having fun. I had an opportunity recently to meet a gentleman from Mississippi who claims to have actually been taken into a spacecraft by a couple of men. And quite frankly, I believe that that gentleman is telling what he considers to be the truth. He wasn't looking for publicity. He wasn't trying to be funny. He was trying to be very honest. He was very sincere. And quite frankly, I walked away from the whole conversation with him believing that what he said is true as far as he's concerned.
A trained observer in space, would he be less likely to detect something or perceive it as perhaps an unidentified flying object as opposed to the man on Earth who is untrained and does see something strange in the sky?
I don't really know. I think it's, even the trained observer gets pretty excited when something new comes in his view, whether he's looking at a rock on the ground or some foreign spacecraft. I don't really know. It would be an interesting thing. I know I got pretty excited when I saw that thing in space, mostly because I thought I was going to run into it.
The spacecraft looked like?
Inside the spacecraft, about all that I could tell, it was a bright glowing light. I don't know what source the light came from. I didn't see any light fixtures or bulbs or anything like that.
There was a cut on your arm that you noticed a couple of days after this incident that suddenly healed. Do you have any explanation for that?
No, sir, I don't. I don't have any explanation for it. It's gone away now, and there's no scar or anything left.
Strange lights in the sky and UFO sightings are still being reported daily, not only by startled citizens, but by responsible and trained observers like military and civilian airline pilots, airport tower control operators, and police officers. In November 1973, Officers C.C. Smith and Joe Wynkoop of the Los Angeles Police Department reported a UFO sighting. Officer Smith, would you care to tell us about it?
At approximately 15 minutes to 10 Monday evening, several citizens from the East Los Angeles area phoned our station and stated that they were observing what they thought was an unidentified flying object. After receiving several of these phone calls, Officer Wynkoop and I were dispatched into the East Los Angeles area to investigate these possible sightings. We observed the object traveling in a southwesterly direction and gave pursuit of the object. While in pursuit, I was passenger officer and I was broadcasting a pursuit to my division watch commander, Sergeant Tigroin of Hollenbeck Division, LAPD. During the pursuit, I managed to take one photograph. This photograph negative was booked into police property using this report and this divisional record number.
Public interest in UFOs is heightened by constant streams of headlines about the reports of curious objects in the sky. These These are slides of actual photographs of UFOs as taken by people around the world who observed sightings. Hundreds of theories have sprung up as to the origin of these mysterious objects. One favorite source is the planet Venus, which after the sun and the moon is the third brightest object in the sky. Yet latest conclusions from scientists are that there is very little possibility of life on that planet. Experts like Dr. Baker believe that we can only frustrate ourselves with constant theorizing. What is needed is more sophisticated analysis of existing evidence, such as these photographs. Many skeptics attack the theory that the flying saucers bear beings from other solar systems by pointing out that all sightings have been accidental and fleeting. Why, these skeptics ask, don't the creatures in the flying saucers make themselves known to our leading scientists and government officials? But Dr. Baker argues that it is not even necessary to consider whether these phenomena were piloted to Earth by extraterrestrial beings with advanced engineering capabilities far beyond our wildest imagination. He declares that when we find something we can't explain, curiosity should drive us to discover an explanation which is satisfying to us and to others in the scientific community.